Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to First Post America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar speaks with his British counterpart David Lammy over ways to counter terrorism. This as tensions between New Delhi and Islamabad escalate after cross-border strikes overnight. Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi is set to visit Saudi Arabia and Qatar on Saturday, following his recent stops in India and Pakistan, and just days before President Trump begins his tour of West Asia. The United Arab Emirates denies an Amnesty International report accusing it of providing Chinese-made weapons to Sudan's paramilitary forces at war with the regular army. This comes as drone strikes rock Port Sudan for a sixth straight day. Poland and France signed a new strategic cooperation treaty committing to help each other in the event of a military threat. The treaty comes amid growing security concerns following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which borders Poland. And Japan's electronics giant Panasonic says it is targeting 10,000 job cuts worldwide. This as the company looks to boost productivity among its workforce. We begin with the latest from India. The nation of over 1.4 billion people woke up on the morning of May 9th after a tense night of cross-border tensions. The country's powerful air defense systems knocked down Pakistani missiles and drones in several border districts of Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, and Gujarat. The debris from the destroyed Pakistani missiles destroyed in the air was recovered from multiple districts of these states. Meanwhile, India's border security force foiled a major infiltration bid in Jammu and Kashmir's Samba district. The Indian forces eliminated at least 7 terrorists of Jaish-e-Mohammed terror group, and India continued cracking down on Pakistani-backed terrorism along the line of control. Islamabad's forces resorted to violating the ceasefire again, prompting a sharp retaliation from the Indian side. In Paunch, a Sikh temple also suffered damage as Pakistan fired mortars and heavy caliber artillery. On May 9th, air attack sirens briefly rang in several cities in northern India. The Indian Air Force warned of a possible airborne threat, urging civilians to stay indoors and away from balconies. In the capital, New Delhi, and the surrounding National Capital Region, air attack sirens were tested and civil defense mechanisms were inspected in preparation of a potential attack. Armed with some of the world's most advanced air defense systems, Indian forces have been swift in surgical neutralizing threats, shooting down drones and warning civilians in real time. Back in New Delhi, a flurry of high-stakes meetings signaled India's readiness for any escalation. The Indian Defense Minister chaired a high-level meeting with the Chief of Defense Staff, as well as the Chiefs of Army, Air Force, and the Indian Navy. He reviewed the security situation along the western border and the operational preparedness of the Indian Armed Forces. From missile strikes to infiltration bids, every threat from Pakistan has been met with firepower, focus, and firm resolve from the Indian side. Late Thursday night, Jammu turned into a war zone as Pakistan launched a coordinated drone and missile strike on military installations across the Indian region of Jammu and Kashmir. The ongoing military exchanges between the two sides marked the deadliest confrontation between the nuclear-armed rivals in years. Sirens blared and explosions echoed as red flashes lit up the sky during the Pakistani night raid on areas along the western border of the Indian subcontinent. Authorities enforced complete blackouts in several Indian cities and urged residents to exercise caution. In a social media post on X, the Indian Defense Ministry confirmed the strike, identifying targets including military bases in Jammu, Pathnakot, and Udaipur. In response, the Indian Armed Forces mounted a swift and effective large-scale counter-drone operation, successfully neutralizing between 300 to 400 Pakistani-fired drones. Visuals showed the night sky lighting up across multiple cities as India's air defense systems tracked and downed incoming aerial threats. Amid the escalation, Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar reached out to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the European Union's foreign policy chief. The Indian EAM briefed both on the situation, stating that New Delhi reserves the right to respond firmly to any further Pakistani escalation. Meanwhile, on the ground, Pakistani troops continued unprovoked firing across the line of control in Kashmir. Indian troops promptly retaliated to protect civilian areas, and these developments come in the aftermath of India's Operation Sindoor against Pakistan, launched in response to the Pahalgam terror attack. The bloodbath on April 22nd, carried out by Pakistani-based terrorists, claimed the lives of 26 innocent civilians, sparking a string of tough diplomatic measures from New Delhi. Now, following that tragedy, India sealed its border with Pakistan, suspended visas, and scrapped a decades-old water-sharing treaty. With drones, missiles, and ceasefire violations back in play, India's defense systems remain on high alert. And while the situation remains tense, India is in fact prepared to thwart any attack from across the border. As tensions flare between India and Pakistan after overnight cross-border strikes, the United States is taking a cautious approach. Vice President J.D. Vance says Washington will not get involved directly, but continues to encourage both sides to de-escalate. In an interview, the vice president said the ongoing conflict between New Delhi and Islamabad was none of America's business.
What we can do is try to encourage these folks to de-escalate a little bit, but we are not going to get involved in the middle of war. That's fundamentally none of our business.
Vice President Vance, whose family was on an official visit in India when the Pahalgam terror attack occurred on April 22nd, acknowledged the gravity of the situation, but framed it as a regional dispute beyond Washington's control. He added that while Washington is watching the conflict with concern, it doesn't intend to dictate terms to either side. And it's not just governments that are backing India. Several Indian origin politicians around the world are also speaking out.
America can't tell the Indians to lay down their arms. We can't tell the Pakistanis to lay down their arms. And so we're going to continue to pursue this thing through diplomatic channels.
The vice president's comments come after President Trump expressed hope for de-escalation, saying he would be willing to help if asked.
On tit for tat, so hopefully they can stop now. But I know both. We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also spoke on Thursday with India's External Affairs Minister. Secretary Rubio reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to working with India in combating terrorism and expressed support for direct dialogue between both India and Pakistan. In a post on X, Minister Jaishankar said he appreciated Washington's support and reiterated that India's response to cross-border terrorism was targeted and measured, adding that India will firmly counter any escalation. Since conducting strikes inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, New Delhi has launched a diplomatic blitz, reaching out to all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, as well as strategic partners including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Japan, the EU, and Italy. And it's not just governments that are backing India. Several Indian origin politicians around the world are also speaking up. Former U.S. presidential candidate Nikki Haley hit out at Pakistan, saying it can't play the victim and that no country gets a free pass for supporting terror. With global support building, India's message is clear to Pakistan that when it comes to national security, its determination is, in fact, unwavering. Russia has marked the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II with a massive military parade on Red Square today. The parade was attended by President Vladimir Putin and a slew of foreign leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted the parade under tight security and a short ceasefire. This year's Victory Day parade coincides with Russia's ongoing war on Ukraine. Our next report brings you all the details.
Today, Moscow's Red Square played host to a grand military parade as Russia commemorated Victory Day, marking the Soviet Union's triumph over Nazi Germany in World War II. However, this year's celebrations unfolded under heightened security, following days of intense Ukrainian strikes targeting the Russian capital. The parade saw tight security measures in central Moscow. Ground troops numbering around 11,000 marched through Red Square. Russia paraded combat drones that its forces are using in the war in Ukraine on Moscow's Red Square. This was done for the very first time during a Victory Day event as per the state media. At the parade, Russia not only displayed its latest weaponry but it also hailed its ties with China and North Korea. President Vladimir Putin was seen embracing North Korean officials, and it comes amid growing camaraderie between Moscow and Pyongyang against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine. A contingent of Chinese troops also took part in the parade. In his address, President Putin appreciated the courageous people of China for their contribution to victory in World War II.
We will always remember that the opening of the Second Front in Europe after decisive battles on the territory of the Soviet Union brought the victory closer. We highly value the contribution to our common struggle by the soldiers of the Allied armies, the resistance fighters, the courageous people of China, all those who fought for a peaceful future.
For President Putin, the presence of China's Xi Jinping is undoubtedly a significant diplomatic win. The two leaders were seen seated side by side during the parade. They held discussions prior to the parade, including informal talks on the situation in Ukraine. In his address, Putin also declared that truth and justice are on our side in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Other leaders in attendance were Brazilian President Lula da Silva, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Serbian President Alexander Vučić, and Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico. Notably, the only European Union leader to attend. This attendance comes despite a clear message from the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas, urging European leaders to abstain due to Russia's war in Ukraine. Russian President Putin had unilaterally announced a 3-day ceasefire to coincide with his 80th anniversary event. However, this was rejected by Ukraine, which branded it a theatrical show. Kiev says that since the supposed ceasefire came into effect yesterday, their forces have faced thousands of attacks, while Russia insists that the truce is being observed by their side and accuses Ukraine of violations. As Victory Day concludes in Moscow, the contrast was stark between the celebratory atmosphere and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, marked by contested ceasefire claims and continued violence with no permanent truce in sight.
And we end today's show from the Vatican, where history has been made. For the first time ever, the Catholic Church has elected an American Pope. Born in Chicago and raised in the suburbs, Cardinal Robert Prevost is now Pope Leo XIV. From his quiet Midwestern upbringing to years of missionary work abroad, he's a leader who has publicly criticized Donald Trump, supported immigrant rights, and championed climate action. Here's a primer on the new Pope.
For the first time in 2,000 years of papal history, the leader of the Catholic Church hails not from Italy, Spain or Argentina, but from the south side of Chicago.
Have the first American Pope that's also part of history is just very exciting. And
well, I'm just hoping that the new Pope can help steer us in a good direction and run in terms of politics. You know, right now it's very complicated.
Meet Pope Leo XIV, formerly known as Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost.
I mean, it's amazing. I think it comes at a really interesting time.
The Holy Spirit always has surprises, and this is what I love about our church.
His journey began in the quiet suburbs of Dalton, Illinois. Born in 1955 in Chicago, Prevost was raised in a devout Catholic family. He pursued a degree in mathematics before answering the call to priesthood. He studied theology at Chicago's Catholic Theological Union. By 27, he was off to Rome for further theological studies, where he earned a doctorate in canon law. But the new pope hasn't lost touch with his roots. He's still registered to vote in Illinois, and he's used that right frequently. In a social media age, the now pope doesn't shy away from sharing his views either. And in April, shortly before his papal election, he shared a post condemning the US government's handling of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wrongful deportation. The post read, and I quote, "Do you not see the suffering? Is your conscience not disturbed?" In one 2024 post, he criticized Vice President J.D. Vance's argument that Christians should rank their love family first and world last. Quoting an article, he reposted that J.D. Vance was wrong and that Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. For years, he's been advocating for stronger support for migrants. Back in 2018, he condemned the first Trump administration's controversial policy that separated migrant families at the US border. A year earlier, in 2017, he amplified a statement that voiced strong opposition to Team Trump's approach to the DACA program, which protects undocumented immigrants brought to the US as children. Pope Leo may be the first American pope, but when it comes to environmentalism, he's cut from the same cloth as Pope Francis. In a 2024 seminar, he warned against turning dominion over nature into tyranny, urging the faithful to shift from words to action. He's praised green initiatives within the Vatican like solar panels and electric vehicles, and warned of the perils of unchecked technological development. After learning about his past criticism of Vice President J.D. Vance and his support for immigrants and George Floyd, right-wingers and MAGA loyalists aren't too pleased with the Pope's election. While some expressed pride in seeing a Chicago-born American ascend to the papacy, others slammed him as a woke Marxist pope. In a time of global polarization, Pope Leo XIV enters the role as both a unifier and a symbol of change. He's American, but lived for decades in Peru. He's pastoral, yet politically aware. He's grounded in tradition, but unafraid to push forward. One who is at ease with both quoting the gospel and tweeting.
That's the end of our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in, not just today, but every day this week. We hope you have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you right back here next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.